So the title comes from a sermon I preached at home, but I think it fits the idea of the truth about words as well, fitting some of the theme that we've been working throughout the first part of this week. And I want to connect it in many ways philosophically with a lot of what we've been doing as well, kind of the problems, the social ills that we deal with in our culture. This may be a little bit different of a sermon than maybe you've heard before. I love this kind of thing. So this is like my favorite sermon, I think, of the week, just because it's the sort of thing I love. All sorts of science going on here. I'm not really a science person, but I love brain stuff and research and statistics. And this is just this really interesting thing I came across, a book called The Secret Life of Pronouns. I know you'll write that down and be rushing out to get it. Super exciting stuff. But little functional words within the way that we speak reveal a lot about who we are. And that's what this research demonstrates. Things we don't even think about. We don't even realize we're doing it, but as we talk and the words we choose and the way we structure sentences, it reveals so much about what's happening in our minds and in our hearts. And I think this is pretty important for us to understand in so many different realms, particularly in the nature of our culture and the selfish nature of our culture, because part of what the pronouns do is they reveal things like selfishness, being self-centered or self-absorbed. And it's just such a huge part of our culture. I think we see this with celebrities, with athletes. I think one of the most famous ones, at least in my mind, a little bit dated now maybe, is Terrell Owens. Right? Remember him, this football player? He was just so big on himself. And there's video of him saying, "I love me some me." Well, that tells you a lot about Terrell Owens. The only thing that would have made that worse is if he would have said it in the third person. I mean, these people are so absorbed with themselves. Right? And so wording does matter. I mean, twice in that little sentence, he's talking about me, about himself, because he's self-absorbed. And we see this sort of thing all the time. I think it's important for us to understand some principles from Scripture that I want us to look at this evening to help us be more aware of our word choices, maybe help our children to be more aware of the way they're talking, the things they're saying. And this is a really simple principle. There's many of them from the book of Proverbs. This is just one of them that can help us as we think through this. Really important. Let another praise you and not your own mouth. A stranger and not your own lips. Proverbs 27 and verse 2. In a culture where children frequently put down that they want to be an influencer for their career, I think these kinds of principles are vitally important for us to be teaching as God's people. C.S. Lewis said, "Humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less." And as we're seeking to follow Jesus and be more like him, this aspect of humility that really I've been trying to hit on all week so far is vital. And if we are people who are egotistical and arrogant, we only think about ourselves, we're not thinking about those around us, and this concept and this way of life is just fed to us over and over again, day after day, and so it's very easy to fall into. We are not at all what Scripture is telling us we need to be. And it can be as simple as our wording and how the things we say even influence further what we think. Scripture has quite a bit to say about this. Pronouns and other functional words, they're little words. They're almost unnoticeable in our speech. Except they really aren't. Those around us consciously and even subconsciously recognize how significant it is when we use certain words and we talk in certain ways. These little words can demonstrate humility or they can demonstrate pride, selfishness or selflessness. They can demonstrate awareness, social awareness, or ignorance and naivety. They are that powerful. So some of the work that's been done on this by people who are experts in this field, James Penbaker is the one who wrote the book, if you're interested, The Secret Life of Pronouns. And there's all sorts of other articles, some of which I may allude to, I may not talk in detail about, but they go into all sorts of neat things about what we can do now with words, particularly now that we can compute them through software and take tons of data, and then it produces results that can tell us all sorts of things about ourselves or about other people. But this was said, I and we are quietly working for us behind the scenes. Pronoun use over time appears to be a good indicator of emotional health, community connectedness, and relationship status. So little words deserve a lot more attention. So here's the basic element of what's happening here. When we look at the way we talk, it's sort of a window into who we are. Even something as significant as how stable we are emotionally can be seen or picked up on by those around us by how we talk, the way we say things. Maybe we would phrase it, getting away from kind of the academic way of thinking of this, someone who's just really negative all the time, right? Or all they ever do in conversation is want to talk about themselves. That indicates some things about them. And hopefully they can be pointed out and they can be made aware of what they're doing so they can realize that they're in need of some change emotionally. Things are not good. They're not right in their life when they're always focusing on I and me and my, right? This is the idea of what these studies are revealing. And in fact, it's so serious that the way we talk, particularly when it is focused on these first person sort of statements like I and me and my, there's a high correlation between depression and anxiety when this is the way we speak. And of course, the opposite of that, and this is kind of broad spectrum, it all depends on context, but often we terms, so when we're speaking in a collective way, and this all sort of makes sense when we think about it, it shows that we're not self-focused. We're focused on those around us. Now, there's all sorts of neat software out there. You can take people's Twitter, or I guess X, if you want to call it that now, and you can use this software that has been developed, and it'll analyze the last 800,000 words and produce this analysis of someone's personality based on the wording they use. So I threw up here a couple people, Jordan Peterson, Joe Biden, names you're probably familiar with. And I thought, well, that's interesting, but maybe I'll just take people from the church and we'll look into their accounts and see what they're like. I'm just kidding. I'm not doing that. That always scares people when I start to go down that direction. We don't like that, do we? But we should be analyzing our own words and the ways that we talk. So I want to take some principles from this idea. I want to read Luke 15. At least part of this text, and I want to demonstrate some things from that text that really speak to this concept. Little words matter when we study, and I've already said that once this week, but as a student of the Bible, as a Christian, as someone who's trying to follow Jesus, we need to pay attention to the little things as we read. And I want to point out some of those as we work through this story of this wasteful son. This son who is rebellious and runs away from his father's home. But I also want to see the context of this and sort of pull it all together. I'm not going to read the two previous parables, but I do want to start in verse 1 of chapter 15. So Luke 15 and verse 1, because it gives the context of why Jesus is doing what he's doing. So I'm going to read the first couple verses there, first 3 verses, and then we're going to jump to verse 11. So Luke 15, 1 through 3, and then we're going to jump to verse 11 to pick up the story of the prodigal. It says, now the tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to hear him. And the Pharisees and the scribes grumbled, saying, this man receives sinners and eats with them. So he told them this parable. And he said, there was a man who had 2 sons. And the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the property that is coming to me. And he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country. And there he squandered his property in reckless living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into the fields to feed pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I perish here with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. And he arose and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet, and bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." And they began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, "Your brother has come. Your father has killed the fattened calf because he has received him back safe and sound." But he was angry and refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him. But he answered his father, "Look, these many years I've served you, and I never disobeyed your command, yet you never gave me a young goat that I may celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him." And he said to him, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this, your brother, was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found." So many powerful thoughts just from reading the story alone. And no doubt you can make a lot of applications just from hearing the words of Jesus. And there's way more applications than we can even pull out tonight. There's been many sermons and you've heard many classes on this text. But I want to pull out some ideas that come from this story that relate to what I'm pointing out here about words and the way that words work and what words say about me, the way I speak and the way I choose to frame my words and the things that I say. What does that say about me as a person? And we need to think about how powerful our words are. Words are tools. They are tools that shape the world. They build things. They are powerful. There's a concept within advertising and marketing called narrative transportation. Some of you who are maybe in that field, you may understand this idea. And what that means is they want to word things and shape them in just the right way to carry you along where they want you to go. You buy things because of the way things are worded. It's powerful. Sometimes a bit manipulative. Because words have that much power in our lives. This is the idea of kind of a story, right? They want to tell a story in a certain way. Sometimes it's images. One that comes to my mind, you may remember this, it was maybe around Christmas time. I think it was like a pharmaceutical company or something like that, some kind of propaganda that they wanted to push. But they had this old man and he was doing the kettlebell exercises. You remember this commercial? And everybody thinks he's crazy. And they're telling this whole story and they're bringing you along. And of course, the end of the story is he does all of this for weeks and weeks and weeks so he could pick up his little granddaughter to put something on the tree. Right? You probably cried when you saw it. That's what they wanted. It's a story that they want to pull you into. And so sometimes it's done through images, sometimes it's done through words, but words have power. Words can be weapons. They're not always good tools. Sometimes they can be used in a malicious way to manipulate or to purposely hurt or to warp. We see this in the beginning of this text in Luke 15. Jesus is gathering with the tax collectors and the sinners. And in fact, earlier in chapter 14, it tells us great crowds accompanied him in verse 25. All kinds of people are coming to Jesus. And we're seeing this all throughout the Gospel of Luke, which we've been doing a lot in Luke. I didn't actually plan it that way. It just happened that these sermons seem to all be from Luke, which is great. I love the theme there. But in chapter 12, we're told so many thousands of people are gathering to him. And the leaders hate it. They're so envious and jealous that Jesus is getting all this attention and everybody's coming to him. And so they're grumbling and they're saying, "This man receives sinners." Interesting. They use a demonstrative pronoun to manipulate the way people are thinking here about this guy who's healing people and helping people. And they purposely, I think, word it in this way to kind of cast a distance between themselves and Jesus. They use the third person pronoun undoubtedly to show that they're separate from him. This man over here, he accepts these people. And of course, the idea there is you don't want to join him, right? You should be weary of that guy because look at the crowd he's running with. This man does this. It's a tool of warning in this case. And of course, we know through the gospel accounts Even Pilate recognizes that this is all done in jealousy and envy and hatred. They're worried about their power being taken away. They're not really worried about truth or what actually God is trying to accomplish and what God's purpose is. They're worried about their own self-interest. But they're shaping things in such a way to try to pull people away from Jesus. They do the same thing in John 9, another fascinating story, right, where they're just leading people in certain directions. We know this guy's a sinner. I mean, that's an interesting way to start a dialogue. Did he cure you of your blindness or not? I mean, we know he's a sinner and he's not from God, but can you tell us how he did this? I mean, do you see how people can use words to shape things? They had already decided, we're told, that anyone who confessed that Jesus is the Christ would be put out of the synagogue. They had already said that, and that's why the blind man's parents don't want to say anything. They had already shaped the debate. They had already made a decision. And they let everybody know by the way they talked about it that if you follow that guy, things are not going to go well for you. And these simple people, like the blind man's parents, they got it. They understood. They were afraid because of the way this all was shaped for them and how this was going to happen. Right? So words are tools, and they can be used as weapons, as manipulative tools, hurtful tools. But words can also be healing. They can be used for comfort and for compassion, for instruction. We can use them to heal ourselves sometimes of the things that we struggle with. I started getting into some of this thing about the mind and psychological ideas because of golf. It's kind of strange. Some good friends here tonight, Lane and Aaron Crawford and their kids. Lane was a good golf buddy of mine, and we shared a lot of information about this sort of thing, the way you think when you're on the golf course. And there's all this mental part of the game. And one of the things that is talked about from a psychological standpoint in golf is positive self-talk. We got some other young guys here I know golf. Right? So if you keep telling yourself you're terrible and you're not any good, guess what's going to happen? You're going to be terrible and not any good. You've convinced yourself. And it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy because our minds are powerful, and the things we say to ourselves, they actually are important. And so we know this from a psychological standpoint. Even the way we talk to ourselves matters. And there are leading psychologists who do all kinds of therapy based on this. Martin Seligman is a really well-known psychologist, wrote a book all about this, cognitive therapies that he uses, things you can do like facing your fears in controlled environments. One of the things that we've done with our children that I talk about a lot of places I go is we say things like, what went well today, right? At the end of the day, trying to shape their thoughts in a positive way. Tell me 3 things that went well. And so some of this is trying to help them think in a positive way about good things that are happening in their life. And this is the sort of things, the therapies that people do when they are depressed, when they're anxious. And Seligman has showed data that this sort of stuff is actually more effective than medicine. Surprising often to many people. Because our brains are powerful, and even the things that we say to ourselves matter. Positive self-talk is extremely important. And research and studies show this over and over again. But also we know our words can be healing to others. A soft answer turns away wrath, the wise man says in Proverbs 15 and verse 1. And we can de-escalate a situation. And some of you have probably done this in your life, maybe many times. We can de-escalate a pretty volatile situation by how we respond to what's happening. Any of you ever worked in a service type job? Someone's upset, they're angry because of what happened, food service or something like that, and they're really angry, and you guys kindly respond to them. Oh, I'm so sorry. Let me take care of that for you. Sometimes they can be pretty rude. I worked at McDonald's for 4 years when I was in high school. Some pretty interesting people came through there, and they could get pretty angry sometimes over their cheeseburgers, and they come in, they're all upset, and who knows what happened in their day. I mean, this is part of what goes into this. They might have had a horrible day. They may have a sick parent. Who knows what's going on, but they're all upset about this little cheeseburger or something that went wrong, and you can de-escalate that really quickly just by being super kind and nice. I'll take care of that for you right away. I'm so sorry we messed that up. Or you can make it worse by responding in a very different way that's rough and gruff and puts it back on them and tells them that their attitude is poor, right? I mean, the way we talk to people can make a huge difference. And that's what the wise man's trying to convey to those he's trying to teach here. A soft answer turns away wrath. Thinking carefully about the words we use can make all the difference in how we interact with people. But also, words are mirrors. I think maybe this is the more important concept I want us to see tonight. It's what the research shows pretty significantly. It's actually what Scripture talks about as well. Eventually, our words will betray us. Now, I don't necessarily mean that in a negative way, completely. If you're a good person, it's going to come out. A good tree produces good fruit, Jesus says in Luke 6. And a bad tree produces bad fruit. And you can't say you're a good person when you're producing bad fruit. That doesn't work. That doesn't make sense. It's illogical. And sometimes for a time in certain settings and certain situations, we can say the right things and we can talk in the right way, but if the reality is deep down, that's not really who we are. Eventually, one day it'll come out. We will get upset, we'll get angry, bitterness will arise, and who we are, it'll boil up from our heart and it will come out. Jesus himself says this is the case. Luke chapter 6 and verse 45, the good person out of the good treasures of his heart produces good. And the evil person out of his evil treasures produces evil. For out of the abundance of the heart, his mouth speaks. Our words are a mirror. They will reveal who we are. It may take some time, and that's why we should, I think, carefully develop friendships and acquaintances. Not too quickly binding ourselves to people, but it takes some time to learn who people are, how they react in situations. And one of those things is the words they use and the way they speak and the way they treat people. Over time and with enough time, we learn quite a bit in that process. And our brains are actually pretty highly skilled at picking up what's happening with the way people use words. Now let's look at Luke 15. I think there's some interesting things happening in this text that are revealing some things about these people. I mentioned what they call I words and we words and all that, and it all depends on the context they're being used in, and that's one reason I want to use this text, because I think that the young man early in the text, he's very focused on himself, right? And you can see his selfishness, you can see his impulsiveness, how he just wants to go do his own thing, and he's rebellious. But then when he has some consciousness of what's happening in his life, he does use some of those I and me terms, but they're used in a very humble way, right? Realizing he's now aware, which we'll talk about awareness here in a few minutes. So it's sort of an interesting dynamic of what's happening in this text. He begins by saying, Father, give me my share. Interesting thought, like if you went to your parent right now and said, hey, can I have my inheritance? I think this is actually something that translates in our culture pretty well. Like what you're saying is, I know you're not dead yet, but I kind of wish you were. Can I just have the money? I mean, that's certainly what it would have been like in Jewish culture, but I think we even still sort of understand that now. When I was a little kid, my mom had these little, glass figurine things. And I was so little, I don't even remember much about it, but I do remember this little exchange that we had. And I can't even remember exactly how she said it, but essentially it was like, when I die, you can have this. And I was like, can I have it now? Not understanding what I'm saying. And maybe this young man doesn't quite get how self-absorbed this is and selfish. And I think often that's the time, and that's that's what happens. It's the danger in our culture that is so self-absorbed that our young people are being raised in, that everything is so self-focused, they may not even see it. And so maybe he's just so unaware that he doesn't realize how cringy this is to be asking his father for his inheritance now. But nonetheless, that's what he's doing. It's exposing his selfishness. He's not thinking a thing about his father or about his brother, about the rest of the family. He just wants his money so he can go do what he wants to do. But as things change throughout the story, now he's more conscious of his situation and who he really is. He is aware of his misery. I talked this morning about the idea from a psychological standpoint that self-consciousness is equal to misery. It's the same thing. When we're aware of who we are, and we're aware of the state that we've gone down into, that is just a state of misery. And this is where he's at. It says he came to himself. He realized, what am I doing? Have you ever been there before? You'd make some decisions and you thought they were good maybe, and then you kind of get down there and like, what am I doing here? Why would I have ever made this choice? That's this young man right here in the story. He suddenly is awoken to the stupidity of his choice, right? He has not listened carefully to wisdom. And that's what the Proverbs say, Proverbs 12 and verse 1. If you don't listen, if you're not listening to your father's wisdom and instruction, you are stupid. That's what the text says. Go read it. Proverbs 12 and verse 1. This young man is stupid. He has not listened carefully to wisdom. He's asked for his inheritance and he's gone and he's wasted it. And I'm fully aware, parents, that I use the S word, but it's in the Bible. It is foolish to not heed instruction and wisdom. And that's who this boy is. Fortunately, he realizes it, as sometimes we do. Comes to his senses, he realizes he's been foolish. And now he's starting to think correctly, right? He is thinking about his situation and where he's, but he is in a state of humility. Just make me one of your hired servants. Right? He's gone down this path of selfishness so far that now he doesn't even feel worthy to be his father's son. He has reached a low state, realizing, I've sinned not just against you, but against heaven. But we love the father's response, don't we? And it is interesting the way he responds to him. Let us eat. Right? Just so simple. Just a little phrase. This boy has done horribly wrong things. And one of the powerful things about this story is, despite the fact that he's run off and he's been rebellious and he's been foolish, when he comes back, the father sees him and he runs to him and he brings him in and he clothes him and says, let us celebrate. But that's not all. I want you to see these demonstrative pronouns in the text. He could have said this any number of ways, but he calls his servant and he's telling them to kill the fatted calf and to clothe him with his clothing and his ring. And then he says, here's why. For this, my son, was dead and is alive again. Do you hear the excitement? Maybe even the pride in a good sort of way. This is my son. And he's come back. He was dead, but now he's alive. He's wanting to emphasize, just like those rulers wanted to emphasize Jesus and how you shouldn't follow him. Now he's emphasizing, this is my son. He was dead, and now he's alive. Let's celebrate together. But then we have the older son, who ultimately, this is what the parable is about. Jesus is addressing the foolishness of the Pharisees and the scribes and how they're grumbling against the people that Jesus is wanting to help and forgive. And notice his language here. These many years I have served you. And I never disobeyed, probably not. Right? He's delusional right now. He's not thinking straight. You never gave me a young goat. You know, one thing I had noticed about this text, the many times I had read it over and over again, and last time I preached on this, not long ago, it hit me what he's doing here in this statement. You know, the fattened calf is killed for his wayward brother. And what he's doing is he's drawing a comparison. He's like, this son of yours, right? That's what he's about to say. This son of yours, this wicked son, he comes home and you kill the fattened calf for him, and you didn't even give me a young goat to celebrate with my friends. Our words reveal our heart. And this boy's struggling. The message is he's just as selfish as the other boy. It's just being demonstrated in a different way. He's still all focused on himself. Yes, he hung with his father for what he could get out of it. He's still a bit delusional, thinking he had never done anything wrong. We know that's not the case. I'm not even sure that what he says here is accurate at all. Really, has he gone this long and his father hasn't ever let him celebrate with his friends? I mean, maybe that's true. I don't know. But he's certainly having a problem here with the fact that his wayward brother got this great party, and he won't even give me a little party for my friends. Just a terrible attitude. But I love the father's response. I mean, it's a response we're familiar with, but I love it because, it accentuates just this little pronoun usage. Have you ever noticed this before? The patterns of the thises in the text, right? This man, he eats with tax collectors and sinners. This, my son, was dead, and now he's alive. This son of yours. He says to his son in verse 31, "Son, you're always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this, your brother, was dead and is alive." Do you see what he's doing there? He's trying to help the brother see the power of this relationship. This is your brother. Why are you acting this way? Why are you being so selfish? You won't even go into the party. I mean, do we see how petulant that is? He comes back, people are celebrating. I'm not going to go in there. Can't believe they're celebrating this son of yours. And the father is so patient. He's patient not just with the younger brother, but the prodigal. He's patient with the older. I wish I was a father like this. There's been so many times I have been not like this. Angry, upset with something my children have done, have not shown the kind of patience that this father shows here. It's a story that has so many great applications. And it's a lesson in the fact that little things matter. Even the way he phrases all of this. Reminding his brother the relationship, his son, the relationship he has with his brother. And our words relate to self-awareness. So really all of this is kind of coming together into this idea that neither one of these boys are very aware. And it's the thing we struggle with, right? When we quickly choose words and we just say what's ever in our mind and we haven't carefully thought about what we're going to say. Part of this is a problem with not really being aware, lacking self-awareness. And the father speaks to this in that final phrase, right? He says, "It was fitting to celebrate and be glad." I love the control that the father uses as he speaks to this boy. He's all upset and angry about the celebration. He's saying, no, it's appropriate. This is the fitting response. And you are unaware, you are delusional right now because you're upset, and what you're doing is not fitting. It's not appropriate. You don't understand what is the right thing to do. I think self-awareness is a really lost skill in our culture. Social media, which is actually anti-social media, has caused us to not really understand how to interact with people properly. It is so self-focused and me-focused. It's all about what I want. And as I've already said, all the algorithms and everything that happens, it's directed to make you happy with everything that's happening. It causes us to actually disconnect from people, even though we tell ourselves it's networking, right? Everything about it is actually causing us to not socialize in the proper way. And so sometimes our word choice can be extremely off. And our awareness can be greatly lacking. And we don't think carefully about what we're doing, particularly online, but then some of these things feed into our offline behaviors as well. Have you ever said something online? I'm just going to admit right now I've done this. Right? No reason to try to hide it. Have you ever said something online that you would have never said to a person's face? That's what I'm talking about. We hide behind our phone or our keyboard, and the way we interact, we would never do that. This is why face-to-face interaction is way better, because almost inevitably we control ourselves in a better way. But we get on a keyboard or on our phone and we just feel free to say whatever. It doesn't seem that we control ourselves in quite the same way. And we're very unaware of the situation. I see things all the time that I look, and I've probably done this myself too, but I see things and I'm just embarrassed about what people in the world are seeing about what Christians say to each other. just no awareness of the impact. There needs to be so much care and thought and awareness to what we're saying, not just in person, but even over a screen. Some of you, because of your jobs or your situation, you are well aware of this. Maybe your business or your company is going to see the things you say, and so you're going to be really careful. I promise you that Josh is careful about what he says on social media. I promise you. He doesn't want people coming to him and saying, I saw what you said there online. You're the preacher. Now, it shouldn't matter who he is, but we just know. We understand. It matters. It matters the influence we have based on what we say, even though it's just a screen. And it doesn't just apply to elders or preachers or deacons, it's everyone. Everyone should be doing this and be aware of what's being said, what's being shared, careful that we're thinking through this process. And of course, in person, we should do the same. When I was younger, I was in a training program with D. Bowman, which was an amazing experience. One time I preached this sermon and I got a little excited and was making a point, and I used the word you a lot. And these are little things D helped me with tremendously. I try to be really careful about using second person. But the point I was making involved a lot of pointing and a lot of saying the word you. And so he came to me Monday morning, which is what he typically did, and he said, I think your intentions were good, but the point was lost. Because literally and metaphorically, you were holding yourself above everybody else. It's just so easy to do, to talk down to people, to be degrading and not even realizing we're doing it. He went on to say, talking about yourself, that goes really well when you end up with egg on your face. But not so great when you're talking about having great faith and being a strong Christian, right? Like, don't use yourself as the example of greatness and superiority and faith. That doesn't go so well. And you works really well when you're encouraging and praising and expressing gratitude, not so much when you is always the subject of accusation and blame and chiding. Right? So this stuff is even important in the pulpit. And finally, what he told me is sometimes someone's going to come to you and they're going to tell you they didn't like your sermon. And whatever they say probably isn't the real reason. It's probably because of some of the things you said that came across poorly or sounded like you were arrogant. And they might not even know how to express that, but your job is to go back and to think through it carefully and realize what was being done wrong, even if they couldn't express it, and fix it. That is hard to do. But it is so important. The words we say matter. They're tools, but they're also mirrors. They reveal a lot about who we are. It matters in preaching. It matters in teaching. It matters in parenting. It matters in your workplace and the way you treat people. And maybe it's so simple that maybe we just don't think about it sometimes. Just this really basic thing, like how we phrase a sentence or how we say something to somebody. And it's just so easy to make a statement without thinking, I am terrible at that. Some of you, we all have different personalities. Some of you are more quiet and reserved, and you think a lot more before you speak. My whole life, I've had to work on not saying the thing that I want to come out of my mouth immediately. That's another thing Brother Brumman told me. He said, you talk too much. So you have to work on the things you're weak in, right? And so that's something I had to learn, and I've had to work on my whole life. Because the words we say matter, and it makes a difference. It makes a difference in relationships. You might not have thought I was going to go the direction tonight that I'm going when you saw the title. You might have thought I was going this direction. So I want to spend like 30 seconds on this, because it is a symptom of the ill of our social surroundings. But if using first-person pronouns demonstrates it's a mirror to our selfishness and our being self-absorbed in our culture, what does it mean when we make up our own pronouns? Like the me monster is selfish, maybe even narcissistic. The Z monster is neurotic. It's mentally ill. It's delusional. It's detached from reality. That is the world we live in. Words matter, don't they? We have people in our culture telling us we need to use certain words and we need to say things in certain ways. Words matter. And we have to think about the importance of what we're choosing to say. Timothy Keller made this statement. It's in the middle of an article he wrote. It's actually pretty good. He quotes some things from Jonathan Haidt, a well-known author. He wrote The Coddling of the American Mind, a book I would definitely suggest, and The Anxious Generation, both really good books. And so Keller's writing a little bit about some of what's been found through his research and the research of others, and he made this statement: the modern self is exceptionally fragile. While having the freedom to define and validate oneself is superficially liberating, it is also exhausting. Young people, I want you to listen carefully to that last phrase, because you have been fed this. Those of you who are still in high school or maybe the early days of college, you have been fed this fake propaganda for so long, most likely, and it's all around you. The importance of self-expression and who you are as a person and your inner self and being true to yourself and all that sort of stuff, and it's total garbage. Even from a psychological standpoint, it's going to leave you empty. But the point he's making is, it seems like this is so liberating, but it's actually just so exhausting. It is not attractive at all. And those of us who are a little bit older, when we see this sort of stuff, and it's just exhausting to listen to people saying, you have to call me this pronoun, and you have to say this. No, we don't. That's delusional, and it's ridiculous. And it's not important that I find myself. It's not important that you find yourself. It's important that we find Jesus and that we live like him. And so self-expression is not what is most vital. Discipleship is what is most important. Our culture is consumed with the defining of self. Self-care, self-love, self-image, self-expression, selfies. It's all around us everywhere. That everything is about you and your life. I just feel like as a parent, one of the battles I'm fighting all the time with my kids is that we are not all living in your world. It's not about self. It's about sacrifice. It's about thinking about others. It's about Jesus Christ. And it comes through all sorts of ways in what we see all around us. Vague booking is another one. Just don't do this. I can't take it anymore. I'll just never understand. And we're like fishing for people to be like, what's wrong? Do we see how self-absorbed that is? How neurotic it is? That is mental illness. And it is all over the place in our culture and our society because we are so selfish as a culture. And the answer, as I've been saying all week, is Jesus Christ. Following him, seeing his example, not getting caught up in myself, which is so easy to do, but seeing I need to deny myself, die to who I am, and I need to become like him. And unfortunately, we live in a culture that enables this kind of mental illness so many ways, but don't buy it. It will never make you happy. It'll never give you purpose in your life. It'll never make your life better. Taking the invitation of Jesus Christ is the only way that you will find that. Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, I will give you rest. Come and learn from me. I will give rest to your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Everything we've talked about tonight, about the world and the way it works and selfishness, it is all heavy burdens. I mean, can you think about the burden of living your life, seeking validation, trying to get everybody around you to tell you the things that you want to hear? I mean, that's the culture we live in. That's a heavy burden. It's a heavy burden that's never going to make any one of us happy. We make ourselves victims. We convince ourselves that everybody else around us doesn't care and is wrong. It is just a delusional and sad way to live. But there's hope. It doesn't have to be that way. We can start telling ourselves the right things. That's not about what I want and that I get what I want and that I'm most important, but it's about seeking first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. That's what's most important in my life is not seeking happiness. If I seek happiness in my life, I'm never going to find it. But it's seeking Jesus and loving God and loving God's people. That's going to be the answer. That's going to be what transforms my life and renews my mind. And I'm going to go through this process as Romans 12:1 and 2 talks about, where I give my body to him and I give my mind to him. And that's how I'm going to be transformed. That's where I'm going to find joy. And it's not because I'm focused on what I want. It's because I'm focused on God's people and you're focused on God's people. That's going to be the way we find this. And it seems a little bit like an uphill battle in our culture, I know. Because the selfishness and the self-focus is all around us. But as God's people, we need to lead the way. We need to understand the importance of our words, the things we say to ourselves, the things we say to others, and embody the life of Jesus Christ as his disciples. Knowing that when we are fully trained, Luke 6:40, we will be like our teacher. That's the invitation tonight. You want to be like Jesus? Even these small little things like our words matter. You can use your words tonight to confess that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, that he's the answer to sin in your life. And we'd love to help you with that. We'd love to baptize you into Christ, to give up the old self, to no longer live for self, but now to live for Jesus Christ and go forward as a person who is seeking the things of God. Can we help you do that? Why don't you come now as we stand and we sing?